freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Zozo Championship. Joining me to break it all down, it's Greg DuCharme. Gregors, hey buddy.
Rick, how are things down under?
It's great. It is Tuesday morning, so I already know what happens. Do you want me to tell you who wins Monday Night Football? Do you want me to tell you? I'm from the future, Greg, so I'm very ready to handicap things.
Can you tell me what traffic's going to be like on my morning commute tomorrow?
Yeah, it's going to be bad. You're going to hate it. Yeah,
it's never bad, Rick.
Yeah.
It was.
Oh well, you know, I just assumed.
I'll really tomorrow.
No, everything is good. Getting adjusted to the time zone. I played Royal Melbourne yesterday, and it kicked my butt. By far the hardest course I've ever played in my entire life.
Really?
I mean, just the thud on the greens, how fast they were. It's actually fairly forgiving off the tee, but the closer you get to the hole is just like Alistair McKenzie just destroys you.
Yeah, it is high level golf for sure. I mean, even when the tour guys play, you can see how much that those firm and fast conditions can penalize them. So that is amazing. I can't wait to hear more about it, Rick.
Yeah, I'll tell you all about it. But we've got work to do, and we are headed to Japan. This is the Zozo Championship, Accordia Golf, Narashino Country Club. Before we jump into the scorecard and the players and everything, Greg, let's kind of set the scene here. We are back to a smaller field, no-cut event, but the composition of this field is fairly unique. Remember, we used to have this a couple of years ago where it would be like the top 60 players in the world and then 10 or 12 guys from the Japan Golf Tour. Now it is a majority of FedEx Cup Fall guys, 51 through 150 or so. Then you get some superstars and some stars at the top, and you're still getting the 10 to 12 guys from the Japan Golf Tour. So it is a really unique field composition, and they're all going to get 4 guaranteed days.
Yes, and it's nice to have a no-cut event when you're traveling all the way to Japan, at least for those players that are playing over here in the States. And for the guys that are playing on the Asian Tour or the Japan Golf Tour, they get 4 rounds on the PGA Tour, which is nice. So this one certainly makes sense to have a no-cut event. And what you see is a number of the superstars that continue to support the event, continue to come over to Japan and play. And, it used to be when the FedEx Cup Fall counted for the FedEx Cup season, when it was the wraparound season, this was one of those events that a lot of the big name players played. They played one fall event. This would kind of be it. And so I think you still see a lot of guys with that commitment, even though they're just playing this is really a standalone golf tournament for many of the superstars, for a lot more guys in this field than we've seen in the past couple of weeks. But at the same time, I'm very curious on a number of them. So I think this will be a really fun tournament to watch. It's a strong golf course, as we'll talk about in a minute. And it is the strongest field we've seen this fall.
Yeah, that's right. Josh, if you want to share my screen, I've got the scorecard up here. So it plays to a par 70, 34, 36. And there's probably a couple of things that most people will note. Actually, before I get into that, this is the 6th year. So there have been 5 Zozo championships. 4 of them have been played here in Japan. The one during the COVID year when they moved everything that was overseas kind of back to America, it was played at Sherwood Country Club. That is where Patrick Cantlay won. But the rest of the history of this tournament is here in Japan. And Greg, you look at the photos, you look at the imagery, a lot of trees out there, tree-lined fairways or tree-lined holes at least will stand out. And the other thing that will stand out is, of course, the double greens that they have, which is much more common in Japan, a winter green and a summer green that makes the view of this from satellite pretty cool.
Yes, that is a unique feature that they don't really use anymore. They've had the ability now to kind of create some grasses that they can use all year round. Which is cool, but they still have that feature, that kind of classic Japanese design feature of having 2 greens. That typically makes them a little bit smaller. than what you might see. Definitely smaller than what we've seen the last 2 weeks on the PGA Tour. The fairways are narrow, and even though it doesn't typically or hasn't played very firm and fast, they're still right around, over the last 5 years, about the 6th most difficult fairways to hit on the PGA Tour. So that is another cool feature, and it leads to a very different test than what we've seen the last 2 weeks, Rick. We talked about this at the Shriners. You have a lot of holes where you can get around the green and make short game birdies, a lot of wedge opportunities into greens, but it doesn't necessarily separate the best ball strikers from guys who figure out a way to make a score. This is a golf course where ball striking really has to be on display. You look at the scorecard, and you have some shorter par threes, 167, 141, 183. They're not overly long, but it's still a 7,000-yard golf course, nearly 7,100 as a par 70. And a lot of that length comes from some long par fives and some pretty serious par fours where you can't drive it right up by the green and have a flip wedge. You got, 417s, 491. You got number 4 is 505. You got some 480s and 490s early in the back nine as well. So there is a significant test, and I think that's why you have winners like Collin Morikawa and Bradley, Hideki Matsuyama, and Tiger Woods who have won at this venue.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, the winners alone do not tell the whole story, but when they are Collin Morikawa, Keegan Bradley, Hideki Matsuyama, and Tiger Woods, like you said, Greg, you got to have a strong couple of shots both off the tee and on approach. Now, you mentioned it. We haven't had, you don't really get fiery conditions over in Japan this time of year. But even without that, the winning score at this event has never gotten to 20 under par or deeper. You're much closer to looking at a 14 or 15 under par winning score. So 3 or 4 under every single day is going to do the trick to probably keep you in the mix here. So it is going to be different than what we've seen at a couple of these scoring fests here in the FedEx Cup Fall. And there's going to be a lot of times where, hey, I'm trying to get up and down. I've got to get up and down for par. I'll take that as a good score and I'll move on.
Yes, and that is, I think, like you said, it's very different than what we usually see in the fall. It does demand a whole lot more out of your ball striking, and you have to play smart golf. And when you have those tree-lined fairways, you can't get away with too much off the tee. If you do miss them, you're scrambling for par. It's not necessarily because of thick rough. You can get actually blocked out. So you have to be very wise, very smart, and get the ball in the right position so you can attack these small greens. Greens of regulation is a very interesting stat this week in particular, because it asks for 2 parts of the game, which I think is kind of cool. We don't have strokes gain data, so it's not separated out from this venue, but you look at the guys that have won here and they've performed very well in greens of regulation, which signifies 2 good shots, as you said.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to get it into the short grass, but you do have to get it in the right position off the tee. So it is a very strong tee to green test this week.
Okay, well, we're going to start naming names here because there are superstars at the top of this board, and then there are stars right below them before we get into some of the familiar names that we have seen this fall. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets. The stuff of absolute dreams.
And we're back. This is the cheat sheet at rickrungood.com, and there are 4 golfers, Greg, over $10,000, led by Xander Schauffele, 11,500. Our defending champion, Collin Morikawa, is 10,500. Hideki Matsuyama is 10,200, and then Sahith Theegala edges his name into this category at an even $10,000 flat. How do you assess the top of the board? These are some really, really big time players.
Yes, we have some heavy hitters. Look, I think this is kind of a difficult range to parse through. And part of the reason for that is all 4 are very playable in my mind. I guess let's start with Sahith Theegala, just because he's the guy that might stand out. You might not put him in the class of Hideki Matsuyama and Collin Morikawa, but he's coming off a win at the President's Cup. He played at the Pro Tour, came in tied third at the Tour Championship. And I think he made a really big jump this year in his consistency, Rick. And he performed well on venues where you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like, he came in second at the RBC Heritage. The positional golf courses, he has shown that he can handle. Tied ninth at the Players. Another one I would be worried about Sahith Theegala playing, and he performed very well. So I have a really hard time predicting when Sahith is going to play well, but it does seem like that's a possibility every single week. So I think he's playable. I think he belongs in this class. And he makes it kind of difficult to parse through. I wouldn't rule him out. Hideki, obviously extremely strong tee to green, has been in really good form, especially with his iron play. The performance on the greens and around the greens at the President's Cup wasn't great, but he has been hitting the ball really well and could certainly pull off a win here too.
The Sahith conversation I find really interesting because he's probably the golfer that I think as the week goes on, I will warm up to. You know, when the pricing first came out and I saw that it was Xander, Collin, Hideki, Sahith, he sticks out like a sore thumb. But you're right that I've been very, very bad at predicting when he is going to play well. And he does not necessarily have a prototypical golf course. Places that you don't think would be good for him, he's been able to put together good performances. And like you said, he's just getting better and better, right? You said he's getting more consistent. He's just getting better and more consistent. So he is probably the X factor of the top of the range here. He's probably not going to be very popular. He is, he's got 2 starts here. He's finished T19 and T5, so it certainly can get his way around this golf course. So I think he's incredibly interesting for this week.
Yeah, and it makes it really tough because you look at Hideki and he's playing in Japan, and that would certainly make sense. And he's played well here before, and he had a great season, and he's hitting the ball well. Hideki checks all the boxes. Collin Morikawa is your defending champion, and he's hitting the ball really well. And while he is the defending champion, you know, he hasn't won since playing here last year. And so I do feel a sense with Collin Morikawa that even though he played great during 2024, there's a lot left to be desired. And he should come in this week feeling very hungry. And I imagine he will. And then you even go up to Xander Schauffele, who I do think in this range stands out as clearly the best player in this range. And it's probably hard for me to get away from Xander. He's just the most complete player. And unless during this time off from the President's Cup to now, he's lost his game, which is hard to imagine because he's never really had a slump on the PGA Tour. I think Xander's the guy. But is it possible that Xander finishes T8 and one of these other 3 players goes on and wins, and the play is Theegala? I think that's a very real possibility. So I put Xander ahead, and the other 3 are honestly, Rick, really close, really hard for me to make a decision.
It's difficult because you and I have both been quite bullish on Collin and Hideki the last couple of months, and they've been playing great golf. Collin gets the fake win at the Tour Championship with the shadow leaderboard, and Hideki has been awesome. But Xander, so there's also another thing that's happening here is there's less data for this event because of how many years, and we don't have the shot link data, and it's usually a smaller field than other events. And because this is kind of a different field composition, I'm not really sure, Greg, what, I could very well be wrong on what types of skill sets are getting. It's just every single, you got me?
Oh, yep. You cut out for a second, but you're back.
Xander is just like every single skill set to get you there, no matter how this ends up playing out. And I just want to remind you, he has not finished outside the top 15 as an individual since April, which is just nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts. Right? He's the rival to Scottie Scheffler. And I do think that while Xander won 2 majors and checked off some pretty big boxes this year, there's still that carrot dangling out in front of him, which is world number 1. And Scottie Scheffler seems to be firmly in that position, and Xander wants to catch him. You know, he's talking about Scottie after winning majors like I'm climbing up the mountain, but I'm not there yet. You don't hear that very often when a guy wins a major championship. You know, that's the top of the mountain, but it's not in Xander's mind. And I think that could go a long way, and it could give you some insight into what he's been doing this offseason, putting in some serious work and taking an event like this very seriously.
2 things. That reminds me, I wonder, and I guess I could look this up, if there's any player who's ever won 2 majors in the same year that did not get to the number 1 player in the world during that stretch. Because you would think, I would
guess, my guess would be Padraig Harrington.
Yeah, like 2. Yeah.
Okay. He won 2.
That's a good guess. Yeah. And you just run into somebody else who is just bonkers.
Named Tiger Woods.
Yeah. The other thing is, and Josh asked a really good question. So if I gave you the choice for just who hoists the trophy on Sunday, you take those 4, Collin, Xander, Hideki, Sahith, or the field.
I would, after a lot of thought, pauses, deliberation, vamping to make up my mind, I think I would go with the top 4. Because I think
so
Xander.
too.
I think Xander's the guy.
The problem is you guarantee them all 4 rounds is really dangerous. If there was a cut at this event, I would take the field. But a small field, no cut, those 4, I think I'd probably take those 4 as well.
I mean, if you really look at this, the guy that's been, I mean, I'm putting a pretty heavy emphasis on iron play this week. And which it's a heavy emphasis every week, but I think it's clearly the most important thing, which it wasn't necessarily last week or at the Black Desert. But you look at Collin, Hideki, maybe not Sahith, but Collin and Hideki probably have been better iron players in the last 4 tournaments than Xander. But I trust Xander's game. I love what he's done off the tee. I love what he does with the short game and the putt. I mean, he's just the most complete player. So that it goes a long way in that. And having him in that group with 3 other really strong players that are noticeably better players than the rest of the field, I think you got to go with the top 4.
Certainly no significant drop-off. Still plenty of star power in the 9K range. Sungjae Im is 9,800. Justin Thomas, 95. Minwoo Lee is 93. And then we round out this crew with Kurt Kitayama, Siwoo Kim, and Will Zalatoris. So there's some questions here. There might be some answers here. This is a very fun group of 6 golfers, Greg.
I do think it's quite fun. And I want to start here, Rick, with Kurt Kitayama, who's at 200. I am just so impressed with this ball striking. I mean, he has gained 6 or more strokes approaching the green in 4 out of his last 5 events.
Mm-hmm.
He's gained strokes off the tee in all 5 of his last 5 events. It's been very impressive. His putting has been horrific. He's lost strokes putting in 4 out of those 5 events. But the only one he gained strokes and he missed the cut at the Wyndham, gained a half a shot. But he still has a tied 6th, a tied 25th, a tied 9th in that stretch. Could we get could we get a Kurt Kitayama even putting performance, even though we won't have the data?
I mean, I even to just continue off that thought process of what he's doing on approach, which is insane. He's gained 11 or more strokes from tee to green in 3 out of his last 4. I mean, back-to-back events where he's gained 12. These are insane numbers. He puts to a 0. He probably wins a couple of golf tournaments. But you're right. I think there's a lot of juice to squeeze here. And this is from me, looking back at this, 2 starts ago, like, why is Kurt Kitayama priced in the way that he is priced? Well, he has absolutely, maybe the finishing positions haven't lived up to it, but the advanced metrics are in an awesome spot right now.
So I love him. And if you're going to play a Xander Schauffele, you can comfortably get Kurt Kitayama in there at 9,200. And you shouldn't have to dive too deep into the 6K range if you do that. That being said, next I would like to go up to the top, which is Sungjae Im, who has also been hitting the ball really nicely lately. He's in really good form with his irons and with his driving. He hit the ball well at the President's Cup. He played well at the Tour Championship and the BMW. I think he's in really good form. And another player he's not at Xander's level with these metrics, but he's been showing since after the U.S. Open, I guess after the U.S. Open, he's been showing a very Xander Schauffele like kind of profile. Again, not quite at that level, but pretty darn close, pretty darn complete. So I think Sungjae Im would also be a great option.
Yeah, he's been a little bit of a Xander light, well-rounded, but not to the extreme positives that Xander has been. Okay, well, how about these two? Justin Thomas, Will Zalatoris, Greg, because if this was another year, if this was, flashback 6, 9, 12 months, something like that, I think that these are two names that would have been part of the favorites. They would have been in the top end of the range. What are we doing now with these two as they're teeing it up for the first time for JT since the Tour Championship and for Will Zalatoris since the BMW Championship?
Let's start with Will Zalatoris, because I actually wrote his name down. I put down 3 names in the 9K. Zalatoris is the third. One, he's at 9,000 flat. So I do like that price. Again, pairing him with a Xander Schauffele, that could work really well, or anyone in the 10K range. But the thing I like about Will Zalatoris is before he shut it down, before the end of the season for him, when he didn't make it to the Tour Championship, he really started to hit the ball well, a whole lot better. You saw some nice putting performances out of him as well. And I get this sense, like, this is always a hard time. Well, what have guys been doing with their off season? And if you're Will Zalatoris, you're trying to get yourself healthy and you're trying to improve on a performance that was way less than your capabilities. So this off season for Will Zalatoris is like, get to work. And I think he's very good at that, at getting to work and getting results out of it.
Just a very recent anecdote. JT Poston took about 2 months off between his last event at the end of last year and just winning the Shriners. So some of these guys just get in the lab, get back to, they work with their coach, they get healthy, they get well rested, and they're ready to rock and roll straight out of the gate. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing, similar to JT Poston as well, like we talked about it last Monday with Poston. I was a little worried about the time off, but you brought him up because it was such a perfect course fit, and that came to fruition. And I think Will Zalatoris fits in this class of Morikawa, Keegan, Hideki, and Tiger, where, he is traditionally just a tee to green killer, absolute killer. So I love where he could be. It's a little risk. I'm willing to go early on Will Zalatoris here at the Zozo. JT
now. Yeah, tee to green killer. Okay, I'm with you there. Tee to green killer, JT. But we just have the consistent putting problems that it's like he's tried everything, but also tried nothing at the same time. I don't know. It's a weird situation. He just cannot figure out how to get the ball in the cup.
And there's really 2 issues with JT. The putting is clearly an issue. I think there's a possibility that can be overcome in a week like this. Again, like you said, you got to get to 14, 15, 16 under. It's never reached 20 under before. So that's a good sign. If you struggle with your putting, you don't have to fill it up on the greens. You can go shoot 3 under. A guy like Justin Thomas can go shoot 3 or 4 under without a great putting day. That being said, I'm also worried about the other end of the bag, which is his driving. And for a guy that hits it far, like Justin Thomas, who has traditionally been pretty good, although he's been errant, he's still been a gainer when it comes to his driving. And we didn't see that this season. I mean, it has been really quite weak off the tee, especially considering what he typically brings to the table. So with those two areas of concern, I don't feel great that Justin Thomas, with no coach that we know of, has solved his driving issues. And I feel no confidence that he's solved his putting issues. He seems to be in a place that's very familiar for Justin Thomas, where those are the areas of concern. His short game is great. His iron play is great. I think he could play well on this golf course. I'm just worried about that. So I'm probably staying away from JT.
The longest and the shortest club in his bag seemed to always be the issue for JT. I will note, so we're talking about winning scores, and the winning scores have been 14, 15 under. Reminder that Collin ran away with this. So he won by 6 shots. Hideki also ran away with it. He won by 5 shots. So you're talking about 8, 9, 10 under par getting you in the mix, right? Maybe it's good enough to win. Maybe it's good enough to contend. Maybe it's second place, whatever. But that is good enough to be very much in podium range.
And you don't have to fill it up on the greens to get to those numbers.
Yeah.
But you gotta hit it. You gotta hit a lot of greens in regulation. You gotta avoid some bogeys if you're in that position. I think it's similar to Zalatoris in that you don't know what you're gonna get. You love the upside. I'm much more comfortable taking the risk with Zalatoris than I am JT.
Okay, fair enough. I've got a couple more guys like that we're going to talk about as we continue. We're going to go to the 8K range. We're going to go to the 7s. And then we're going to get down to the 6K range, which I admittedly do not want to touch one single bit. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
Stat Street could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
All right, Gregors, we are back here. We've got 11 golfers in the 8K range. And now this is where it feels like the FedEx Cup Fall events. These are the names that have been playing week in and week out. Starts with Bo Hostler, Maverick McNeely, Max Grazerman, Doug Ghim. The middle of the range is Eric Cole and Tom Hoagie. Then we round it out with JJ Spawn, Max Homa, Seamus Power, Harry Hall, and Patrick Rogers. So now this is what we've been handicapping. There's a lot more recent form, of course, for these guys compared to some of the other names we've already spoke about.
Yes. So now we have an idea of what they've been up to, how they've been doing it. We're not talking about guys that are in the middle of an off season at this point. Right. So, this is the first place I'd like to go, Rick, is one I typically don't. And it's Doug Ghim. I mean, this ball striking performance, much like Kitayama, I know they were both in the mix last week, but it has been stellar. Just really hard to ignore. And the putting has been a real problem, but all of a sudden he gains a little more than 2.5 strokes putting, and he comes in second. And very, very well could have won that tournament if a couple more 6-footers go in. So I'm willing to go back to Doug Ghim. I think this golf course is going to set up really well for him. He's got to be feeling extremely confident with his golf swing. And I like the price at 8,600 as well.
Yeah, this is kind of vintage Doug Ghim. Just knock the cover off the ball and then see what you can do on the putting surfaces. And even though there's a lot of red there. Like Greg said, last week was a good putting week. And even some of these where you just lose 1 or 2, it's actually not a bad putting week for Doug Ghim, and you're probably brimming with confidence. I look at Beau Hossler. Beau Hossler's playing great. If you want to play Doug Ghim, great. I probably will. Harry Hall's been playing. I think those guys, they've been playing. We know exactly what they are. I need to have the conversation about Max Homa because I have no idea what Max Homa is. And Josh brings up a good point in our chat. Like, could you imagine this event last year or a year ago, Max Homa being $8,200 and cheaper than Beau Hossler and Doug Ghim and all of these other guys? Was the President's Cup, which was a very sound performance with very good metrics, was that enough? Or does he need to prove something to us as in playing his own ball in an individual stroke play event on the PGA Tour?
I think the price is low enough to buy now.
Okay.
On Max Homa. I've seen an improvement off the tee. Right. I saw an improvement off the tee the last 2 rounds. Like, you look at the BMW, he lost 9 strokes off the tee. It was incredibly bad. But it really, most of that came in the first 2 rounds. So he hit it much better. Right, you have it right there. So I don't say it's the wrong thing. BMW rounds 3 and 4. He gained strokes off the tee in both of those.
Yeah. Then he gains both off the tee in Napa, and then he gains off the tee. Small gains, but gains in all 3 of his matches. So that is essentially the last 7 times he's teed it up, he's gained off the tee.
Exactly. And I think that's a pretty significant improvement. The President's Cup can give someone a lot of confidence, even though he didn't have a great record. I think the metrics show that he played pretty well. And he can always blame Brian Harman.
Yes, which I love to do. So why not? Yeah.
So put that on Brian. I think this is the time to play Max Homa. So I'm kind of jumping all over that one. He's one of the names that I wrote down in this range along with Doug Ghim.
Yeah, I think you're right. I did not even realize it was when I looked at it, I was thinking, wow, he's driven it better for like 5 straight rounds. I didn't even realize it went back to those final 2 rounds at the BMW Championship. So certainly gives me a bit more confidence there. What else do you want to do here, Greg? Because these are familiar names. We know who's playing well. JJ Spawn's playing well. Eric Cole finished runner-up at this event last year. I mean, how do we separate these guys? Yeah,
the guy that just jumps out to me, who I can't seem to get away from, is JJ Spawn. I'm very interested in what he's bringing to the table right now. It's been a long time of just really solid since at least the John Deere in July. But you have to go back all the way the Valspar, which was in March. From that point forward, from the Valspar on, he has lost strokes on approach once at the Sanderson Farms, which was a WD. So I'm very encouraged with that. The off the tee game has been much better. There were some struggles since the Valspar, but for the last 6 or 8 starts that he's made, he's performed very well, and he has a really nice record here. Right, tied 6th in 23, tied 25th in 22. I'm very, very happy and comfortable with where JJ Spawn is. We just got to see some, results out of this play.
He's been under the radar, one of the better, most consistent golfers on tour, like you said, since the Valspars for basically 6 or 7 months right now. Okay, is there anybody else that you are comfortable deploying here in the 8K range?
Those are my 3 guys in the 8K range. I would also, if you're feeling frisky, and we've taken some chances so far on guys. If I was going to take a chance on somebody, Grazerman might be another guy at 8,700. Now you'll see in the metrics a pretty poor performance in the playoffs with his ball striking, but I'm very sort of lenient on that. Are very curious is that just the end of a long season? He had those back-to-back runner-up finishes at the 3M and the Wyndham. Did he run out of gas? And we saw a decline in his performance. I think there's a chance that Grazerman comes back to form and plays a little better than he did in the playoffs.
Yeah, getting 2 months to basically rest, recover, get everything back in order to start up again. The only other one that I'd be willing to go back to here is Seamus Power. We talked about how well he plays, and in a similar vein to Xander and Sungjae, when Seamus is playing well, he's playing well across the board. He missed the cut at Shriners. He cannot figure that place out. I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's a home game and he's got a bunch of people in town and he's got a bunch of obligations or whatever. He never figures out TBC Summerlin. So I'm not gonna beat him up over that when the rest of his game has been very, very strong, and I'm not super concerned. So that's the only other one that I would go with there.
Probably smart. I didn't mention him, and we've been on him the last couple weeks. He'll probably go win this week. So probably smart to mention him.
Perfect. The 7K range. So this is where we're getting 26 golfers. The top, Putnam, Taylor Moore, Ben Griffin. The middle of the range, that's Ryan Fox, Victor Perez, Chan Kim. And then the bottom of the range, Brendan Todd, Charlie Hoffman, and Kensei Harada, as we start to get into some of the Japanese golfers as well. So, Greg, find me a couple of names that we can feel a bit comfortable with here in this range.
Yeah, I'd like to go to 7,800 and go to Gary Woodland, who had a nice performance last week. Was in the mix heading into the final round at the Shriners, ended up finishing tied 9th. But you look at what he's done with his ball striking in his last 5 starts, he's gained 3 or more in 4 of them. He's gained strokes off the tee in all of them. And we're starting to see some inconsistency with the putter, which is a good thing because there's also been times in Gary's career where it's been consistently bad. So there's a chance that Gary puts up some good numbers on the greens. I think it's an all right time to roll him out. He also has played well here in the past. The only start that he has is in 2019. He came in 5th. So I think it's also a good venue for him.
I have often lumped together Gary Woodland and Rickie Fowler because it feels like they have gone through their ups at similar times, their downs at similar times, and now maybe they're ups again. So let's just get to Rickie here because I think we've got the best 2 consecutive starts for him in a really long time. So I had a long stretch after the Open Championship, comes back and starts playing in the fall, T16 at Sanderson, T23 at Shriners with some really good metrics along the way. Are you buying this, Greg, or is this a little bit of smoke and mirrors from old Rick?
I don't know if it's smoke and mirrors. I think things are definitely better than they were, and he's playing golf, right? He's out there. He's got some degree of control over his golf ball, and things aren't broken, if you will, which is it's a good place to be. Would you jump on this guy if it wasn't Rickie Fowler? After that probably not. So it's good and it's a lot better, but I don't know if it's enough for me to jump on board. I mean, he did play great. He played really well last week, but we get a T23 out of it.
The only thing that gives me more optimism is I'm pretty sure he switched like everything in the bag. I think it's like new driver, new putt. He's like got like everything different. And I think that honeymoon is always worth a little bit of something when you get those immediate results. So I don't know. You're probably right in the sense that if this was Andrew Putnam or Taylor Moore or whatever else, I would have probably just glossed over this.
Yeah, I think so too. So I'm fine to gloss over it. Now, you did mention Andrew Putnam.
Yeah, I shouldn't have mentioned it because I shouldn't lump these two together because Putnam's been really, really good, right?
So he's at 7,900. He has a runner-up finish here. He has a really strong finish here. I think he was runner-up.
Yeah, runner-up in 22. He's played here 3 times, so they've gotten better each time. T59, T39, and then a runner-up finish 2 years ago.
Awesome. So some pretty good stuff from Andrew Putnam. The iron play has been great. We know he can be a very good putter, although it hasn't been great of late. I think that's why the results have kind of been lagging. So if Andrew Putnam can get the ball and play off the tee, he could be set for a really strong week. So he's an option. I don't love it because his driving doesn't like JJ Spawn. Who else were we talking about? JJ Spawn, Doug Ghim, Kurt Kitayama. They have been on fire with their irons, and I'm all over them. Now, Andrew Putnam has been putting up similar numbers with his irons, but the off the tee performance hasn't been up to that level. And remember, like, ultimately, we got to hit a lot of greens here. And if we're hitting the ball out of play or into the trees or just in the wrong spot off the tee, it could really hamper the approach capabilities. So I like Andrew Putnam, but I am a little cautious.
Yeah, no, I feel that he might just play himself out of it if he can't keep the ball in play off the tee. He just might be playing from behind, playing from out of position constantly.
What I'd rather do, if I may, is
please
go down to 7,400 and play Mac Meisner.
Okay.
I mean, talk about a guy that's on fire off the tee. On fire approaching the green. And he's been very good. He's been very good off the tee since the ISCO in the middle of July. In those, let's see, 4, 6, 7 events, he's gained strokes off the tee in 6 of them. All of them approach during that time span. And he just gained 7.5 strokes approaching the green in Utah. So I'm very, very pleased with his ball striking capabilities.
Yeah, he's been awesome. He's somebody that we've been tracking quite a bit over the last few months. So it's good to see that good play has continued. I'll point out Hisatsune here. So this is Rio. He's $7,300. His record here is T6, T12, and then T52. That's going back. So his best finishes are his most recent finishes. It's been up and down, to say the least, recently, but he had a T3 at the Wyndham Championship. He went over and played 4 events in Europe. They were not good. Missed the cut at the Sanderson Farms, but got a little bit back on track at the Black Desert Championship. Anybody else here, Greg, worth a consideration?
I wouldn't even look at anybody else. I don't have anybody else on my list, Rick. I thought Hisatune, however you pronounce his name.
I don't know. I had a native Japanese speaker tell me that it should be pronounced the proper acceptable American pronunciation of it would be Hisatsune.
Hisatsune.
Hisatsune. 3 syllables. Hisatsune.
Okay.
And then, but when you turn on the TV, they always say Hisatsune, which I mean, I don't want to tell like NBC and CBS that they've not done their research and they're wrong, but I don't know. That's not.
Well, they both make sense because typically my understanding is, and what I've noticed is that the American pronunciation of Japanese names are very close to the way they're spelled, right? You can sound them out.
Yes.
And
yes,
Hisatsune may not seem like the way, like Hisatsune would be kind of how I would pronounce it, but Hisatsune actually makes sense. H-I, then S-A-T-S, U-N-E, Hisatsune. So we'll go with that. I think he's
both. You
could play him.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. So, hey, if anybody else out there if you're in Japan right now saying you guys are idiots, here, I actually had somebody record it and like give me a big write-up and like an audio version and like all that stuff.
How about that?
Yeah, it was very helpful. I love that. I want to get these guys' names right. The 6K range, Greg, brutal.
Yeah.
Beyond brutal. I mean, okay, so this is where you get the 10 or 12 guys from the Japan Golf Tour. I've got Asian Tour on rickrungood.com. So I have some results for these guys. I don't have everything. I don't see a lot to write home about. Then you get guys that we're very familiar with, like Joel Damon or Nico Echeverria or Davis Riley, Luke List. Still not really excited. CT Pan had a good finish last week, but that's one of his best finishes in a while. I hate the 6K. I just have zero confidence in any of these guys.
No, I have zero confidence as well. So that being said, if I have to, because we always pick somebody, I've been very high on Justin Lauer over the past couple of weeks, and he's missed his last 2 cuts. I still think his performance has warranted attention. I don't think he's missed cuts in a place where he's playing terrible golf. So I would give Justin Lauer another look, another opportunity, as iron play has been pretty good. Ben Coles would be the other guy at 6,800, whose iron play has been phenomenal. Again, the putter is just very weak, but kind of leaning into the ball strikers golf course mentality, and thinking maybe he can not putt that bad because he has putted well. So, maybe Ben Coles would be a play too.
So I clicked through basically every single name here this morning, and those were the 2. I said, if you made me pick, and I actually threw in CT Pan. I said, Ben Coles, CT Pan, Justin Lauer, if you made me choose. I'm not really excited about anybody else. I'm a sucker for Nico Echeverria. He is $6,400. If you wanted to go that route, sure, let's do it. I'll pull up Satoshi Kodaira's profile because he's the mint price, and I think the last time we've seen him was Corn Ferry this year. Yeah, it's just miscut, T58, 3 more miscuts, a WD. This is not good.
One thing, there are 2 guys at 6,100. All right, Yuta.
Yep.
I don't want to try to pronounce his last name.
I don't know. I would say it's Sugoria.
So yeah, Sugiura, perhaps. He won in March on the Asian Tour, the New Zealand Open. He finished in early September. He finished tied 9th on the Asian Tour as well. Maybe there's some good play from him. And then the other one was Takahiro
probably
Hataji, right? Who is at 6,200, I believe.
61.
So he's at 61 as well.
Yeah.
So he's got a couple of fine finishes as well. Again, limited data on both of them. So actually, Hitachi he won the New Zealand Open. So then,
yes, he won the New Zealand Open and then played I have him playing a European Tour event in the end of April. He finished T30 there. Those are the only. I only have four results for him. One of them was the win at the New Zealand Open this year.
And then and then Yuta has a T7 on the European Tour at the Ispis Handa.
Yes.
That's what so I clicked, I made those backwards. But he also has, he finished in the International Series. Macau finished 14th. So, maybe one of those guys is playing some good golf, but boy, it's rough.
It's rough indeed. And it is also a reminder that, so this will kick off Wednesday evening. I don't know the exact time or what the Eastern time is, but make sure, do not delay on getting your lineups in. Do not delay on getting your one and dones in. If you're in those one and dones, do not delay on getting your wagers in, because it is going to be earlier. And then we will, oh boy, I'm going to screw this up. So it's, I don't know what time it ends in the States, but we are going to do a recap on Sunday after it's over. For me here, that'll be like Monday at 4 a.m. or something, which will be great. And then of course we're going to do the mega preview pod tomorrow, Greg, which I know is at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We have bumped it up 4 p.m. Eastern time. Sunday is 1 p.m. Eastern time.
I unfortunately can't make it tomorrow, but I will be back with everybody on Sunday to break it all down. So yeah, that 3 a.m. we're not going to do it at that time. We'll do it at 1 o'clock on Sunday, and then we can get to American football.
American football, which actually, so it is 9. It's almost 9:30 in the morning here on Tuesday. Okay, Monday Night Football is kicking off soon.
Oh,
which is going to be weird.
That's very strange.
I'm watching Monday Night Football on Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. All right, Greg DuCharme, a pleasure as always. He can be found at The Real GFD. Producer Josh does all the hard work behind the scenes. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll be back on Sunday. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.